Welcome to the Awesome Dad Show. Today we are joined by George Jones, Heisman Trophy candidate, former NFL player, now author of The Present Dad. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, George, it's been a pleasure. It's really a pleasure to be connected with you. I love speaking with professional athletes because you just bring such, I think, passion and such influence to the space of fatherhood. But before we get into, I guess, the nuts and bolts and a little bit of your backstory, I want to know what inspired you to write this book, The Present Dad?
Well, I mean, growing up without a father had a big impact on me as a child. So I always wanted to be a father. I always wanted to say those three letters, dad. I always wanted to say that. So when I had the opportunity to be a father, I knew it was going to be the greatest thing in the world for me. So once I went through it, the ups and downs of being a father, I decided there are probably other guys out there like me that are struggling about fatherhood and everything. So I wanted to share my story and my ups and downs about fatherhood with the rest of the world. And hopefully I can help somebody just like other people have helped me along the way to be a better father.
Well, it's certainly a really important thing. And we talk about this a lot in my Facebook community, the Awesome Dad group, is breaking the cycle. Because just because our fathers or their fathers before made mistakes, that doesn't mean that we have to, So, but the reality is that if you grow up without a father, your chance of success is diminished greatly. Is there anything you can attribute to helping you to break the cycle in the raising of your three children? Is there anything that you could attribute that to?
Well, I would say in 1987, I met a young man by the name of Nathan Broom. We were really good friends in the 7th grade all the way up to now. I met him. He invited me to come over to his house and eat dinner. So that was the first time I met his family, Monty, Jackie, and Leah Broom. So being around them, watching Monty, the father, how he was a father to Leah and Nathan, and how he was a husband to Jackie, that was a profound effect on me. It taught me at a young age on how to be a father, a loving father, how to be patient, the ups and downs about being a father, and it taught me how to be a husband. So Monty, I can contribute most of my success and most of my things as a father to Monty Broom.
So, I mean, what it sounds like is you were able to find a positive male influence in your life, which is a blessing, which is very fortunate. We don't always have that. How, as fathers, as men, this is something I think about a lot because we're so caught up in our business, our jobs, our own lives. What are some ways that you've been involved with being that positive male role model for other children? Do you do any sort of volunteer work with kids, anything with the NFL? How are we giving back now? Because it's not talked about enough. We need more of it.
Yeah. So out here where I live out on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, in Dripping Spring, Texas. So I do a lot of coaching, with youth, with my own young kids and a lot of their friends and everything. So I volunteer before the pandemic in the school. I will go up to the school every Friday to eat lunch with my kids. I would go on field trips. I will go be watchdog at the school. So not only did I take an interest in my own kids, I also took an interest in other people's kids. So for example, when I will go up at the school and they had the thing where the kid would show their parents what they were doing in school. Mm-hmm. So when some kids' parents couldn't make it, and if I knew the kids' parents, I would sub in as the parent for them, and I would have them explain to me what they were doing in their schoolwork, and then I will relay that message to the parent. And also, when
I just want to say real quick on that note, George, I think that is something that is really admirable. We recently had a daddy and like it was like a Donuts with Daddy Day at school, yeah. And all the dads zoomed into the class, and there was one little kid whose dad didn't show up. And I could just see that, the teacher was doing her best to kind of smooth it over, say, oh, well, daddy might have been driving or maybe has a big meeting, but he still loves you, And that, I can just see that as being like a really kind of sad moment. All these other dads could make it, but.
Yes. So Again, just like you said, yeah, it's a sad moment when you see kids without a father or a mother up there that comes up. So I tell parents all the time, I think it's important if you can niche out a little bit of time to go
Mm.
see your kids in school, just, have lunch once a month, go up for recess, go up to like read to the class, or even go help out in the class. Because I remember when I first moved out to Texas from San Diego, I met a family in my neighborhood, the Fuchsias. So it was four young kids. So my son was really young at the time. He was about one. So what I would do is I would go up to the school, like when they had like volunteer or career day. I
Mhm.
will go up to the school for the young kid in my neighborhood and do the career day. I will speak to the school, speak to all the kids, and go up there and be like a support system for the two girls. And now those girls are like, they are out of college now, they're adults, and they still thank me for doing that all
Mm.
those years ago, back in like 2008, 2009. I used to go to their field days, I used to go and eat lunch with them. So I feel a civic duty as a parent that if I see other kids and they don't have parents up at the school a lot, and I know they want somebody to just pay attention and talk to them, I will go out of my way to do that, because I think all kids, all they want is somebody to love them and to listen to them and to talk to them. So I know what that feeling's like. So if I can do that for any kid, I will go do it.
Respect and you're always so caught up in helping your own kids, because we all know that kids require so much attention. But just it's kind of funny, my wife makes fun of me when we're at the playground. I'm doing all these games with my kiddos, like we'll start by
Yeah,
playing like red light green light or freeze
yeah,
tag, and all of a sudden it's just like a magnet, all these kids are coming over because they want to be part of it.
yeah.
That's kind of a funny thing. you know
I wonder, Mark, were you like me when my first son was born? I was like so protective of him. Like when he would like walk, I would sit there and follow behind him because I was afraid he would trip up and fall. And my wife used to tell me all the time, you got to let him move about, on his own and everything. But I was really scared that I thought he would, injure himself.
yeah.
But when our second and third child came, I kind of pulled back and let them, feel their wear and everything. But I think as a first time parent, most of the time, we go through all the trials and errors with our kid with the first one. And then, as we get more kids, we're kind of a little bit more comfortable with what we're doing with them. And, again, Mark, being a father for me is the greatest thing in the world.
Mm.
I mean, scoring a touchdown in the NFL, rushing for a lot of yards, and getting a lot of adulation from fans. But it's nothing compared to being a father when you have a young son or a young daughter, looking at you in your eyes, knowing that you have to protect this person and help this person to get through life and all that. I just think it's the greatest thing in the world. And like I tell most people, the greatest gift that God gave me, it wasn't athletic ability. It was that he gave me the opportunity to be a father. And that's the
Mm.
greatest joy in life for me.
So do you think I mean, I actually think about this a lot because I'll just put this in the context of men. As men, we often wrap up our identity in our profession, in our work,
Yeah.
and that's where we achieve our success. That's where we achieve our self actualization, if you would.
Yeah.
But what happens then is that everything else gets left off the side, whether it's your spouse or your kiddos. So do you think, I'm just kind of curious for your opinion, do you think that that's something that's intrinsic, like you either have that ability to separate, right? I guess I'm putting a bad, I'm saying, I'm kind of explaining this in a difficult way. I guess what I'm thinking is, as like an NFL player, it strikes me that you would get really wrapped up in your profession, and that would be
Mhm.
how you identify. And then once your professional athletic career ends, then it seems like it would leave you with maybe like a hole. And how do you fill this hole?
I never felt that way, to be
Okay.
honest with you, because again, I think I use, football a means, the way to make money, to be able to be a parent later on in life.
Hmm.
So for me, I look at it like my whole when my first son was born, I gave up my identity from that point on. I said, it's not about me anymore. Everything is about him. I'm going to do everything humanly possible to be there and do everything for him. And to a certain extent, you are correct on, like, you kind of miss out on with your spouse, because there's been times in me and my wife Katie's relationship, I have given so much time to the kids, I kind of like neglected her in some way. So I at the beginning of, you know, being a parent, but I've gotten better on being able to balance both now as I've gotten older and more mature. But for me, you know, as fathers are usually not nurturers. We're like protectors. We provide for the family. We go out and do that type of stuff.
Right.
But for me, I wanted to just change the how fathers are viewed. I wanted to put the kids first and foremost ahead of my needs and, you know, even my wife needs. But now, like I said earlier, I've gotten better at being able to balance both and be able to give my time to our sons and also give my time to my wife that she needs.
Well, and that's something that definitely doesn't get talked about enough, right? My wife and I kind of recognize this early on. I mean, we look at divorce rates in the United
Yes.
States; they're out of control. And you know, if you can't keep your marriage together and your relationship with your spouse together, your kids are going to suffer at the end of the day. Like, there's no way around that. They're going to be put in a bad spot.
Oh, no doubt about that, Mark. And I don't know if you know, I got 3 boys, and my middle son has special needs. He has Down syndrome.
Mm.
So you couple that with, you know, with divorce rate. Usually, families that have a kid with special needs, the divorce rate is in the 90s. You
Whoa.
know, that alone. So again, trying to be a parent to just a typical kid is very difficult. When you put on top of that a kid with special needs, it makes it even tougher. So for me, being a father to our 3 boys, I try to balance out on not giving too much of my time to just my son with special needs, because he needs a lot of my attention.
Yeah.
Everything. So I try to balance out with the 3 boys to try to give them all the attention they need, but try to make it a balance with all 3 of them.
So I'm kind of curious on this, not to cut you off there, but
Yeah.
I have kind of a similar conundrum, right? I've got my 5-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son, right? And so with my 5-year-old, we were like, you know, we were best buddies, right? You know, we would do everything together. And then when you bring in the second kid, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that attention is divided, you know?
Yeah.
So do you find ways to like still have solo time with your kiddos, or is it still like all group time, or because that's difficult?
Well, I would say with my our 3 boys, I got my oldest son is a freshman in high school. My middle son is a 7th grader. My youngest son is in the 4th grade. So I tried to space out time, like especially with my older son, when I take him to school, we one-on-one, we get to talk about everything,
Right.
how he's feeling, the ups and downs about being in high school, girls, sports, etc. So I get that one-on-one time with him during that time. My middle son, I try to niche out one-on-one time for him when the other 2 kids are in sports. And my youngest son, I'm his coach on his football team. So we get that father-son bond, just like I did with my oldest son when I was his coach. We have that one-on-one bond. I'm coaching him, so he's getting a lot of time with me. So as I've gone along this journey of being a father, I have learned how to niche out time for all 3, but I've also learned how I'm supposed to communicate with all 3, because what I say to my oldest son does not work for my youngest son, and vice versa. So I've learned how to talk, which words affect them, how I use them and everything. So it's taken me a long time to be able to do that, but I've kind of quote unquote mastered how to manage our 3 boys.
Yeah, well, and to your point, this is kind of a shocking thing, an amazing thing. Like every kid is so different, you know. You can, and you definitely cannot put a square through a circle hole, so to speak. I'm curious about coaching as a father, because this has been kind of a tricky thing for me. You know, does your kid? How does your kid react with like when dad is like when you're trying to coach your kid on, hey, head up, shoulders back, that type of thing. How does your kid react when dad tells him versus coach tells him? Are you able to separate the two?
Mark, that's a great question. So I don't know if you know my backstory with Archie Manning. Coaching my oldest son, I didn't think I was doing a really good job. I was like so tough on him. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about really tough because I knew the ability that he had, and I was just constantly pushing him. But that constant push, I was really pushing him away from me.
Mm.
Our relationship was drifting apart because I was so tough on him, and there was no playbook out there on how I'm supposed to coach him and be his father at the same time. So I ended up about 4 or 5 years ago, the Book of Manning come out. I don't know if you've ever seen that, the Book of
Yep.
Manning family.
Yep.
So I watched it and I see how Archie was with Peyton, Eli, and Cooper. So I'm looking at that and I'm looking at how he was doing that. And I got really emotional because I didn't think I was doing a good job as a father to my sons. So I reached out to him and, full transparency, I told him this is what I was doing. This is what I was saying after practice, after game, after a bad play. And he gave me some tools and some on what to say, how to do this, how to do that. When I implemented those tools, me and my oldest son, our relationship went from like 1 to 1,000.
Wow.
Because I was like, if he did poorly in the game, the first Mark we would get in the car, I would like, you did this wrong, you did that. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So Archie told me to go in the positive, say everything that's positive, and then let my son tell me what he thought he did wrong, and then we have a conversation. Now you fast forward it to my youngest son, all the mistakes that I made with my oldest son, I don't make them with my youngest son. So it's a lot easier to coach now because I went through all those trials and errors with my oldest son. Now with my youngest son, I'm a little bit more laid back. I give him a lot more leadway, and I try to be dad, but be coach at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a fine balance. And I totally empathize with you when you I watch my daughter playing soccer and I'm like, oh, you just kick the ball, be aggressive,
Yeah.
and it's like, I know if I could be on there in the field and like kick the ball forward, it would be, it would work out, but she's on her own journey,
I mean, do you find yourself like when you're in the stands, you're like sitting here, like that's what I was doing. Do this. I'm like saying it out loud. And so like it got so bad with my oldest son. My son will make a tackle and his two eyeballs will look directly at me to see if I approved it, if he did it right, or if he did it wrong. So, as I went through that, I had to change that because
isn't that kind of a good thing that he's like looking at dad to say, hey dad, what do you think? Or was it that, because I think that's a good thing for your son after he makes a big play. Because my daughter, when she scores a goal, the first thing she does is look at me, and I'm like, yeah.
I would say it is a good thing, but then when he doesn't do well, he looks at me. He looks at me, and then I have to make sure that I keep my facial and my expressions the same, like giving him a thumbs up. Even if he does bad, I give him a thumbs up so he doesn't dwell on that play and move on to the next play. So again, Mark, it's took quite a while to be able to do it right for me. I had a hard time with coaching and plus, being a former professional athlete, you see your kids play sports, and then again, I have to remind myself they're only like 10 and 11 years old. They can't see what I can see and why they're not making certain moves.
Yeah.
And I have to realize that sometimes, because I'm thinking as an adult and they're still really young, and I'm trying to say, why can't you see what I'm seeing? But as I've gotten older with this, I can understand, because I'm pretty sure at 11 years old, I couldn't see what I'm seeing right now as well.
No, I'd hope not. I would hope not. And
Yeah.
I think at that age you just want to have fun and certainly improve. So I'm kind of curious, right? Football in my years of playing football, it was not so much about being fun. It was the coaches were about like drop and give me 20. We're doing wind sprints. Like they weren't like, hey, nice try. It was like, get in the fucking game.
Yes.
So do you think that is something that you had to shake off or incorporate, or do you think that's something that you try to change when you're dealing with your kids, right? Because it seems like there's a balance, right? We don't want to coddle our kids and tell them that,
Yeah.
oh, everything's going to be fine, because that's not the way that life is,
Yes. Well, I try not to have that old school mentality when it comes to like sports these days. Like, I would never have my kids or any kid go down and do bear crawls. Like,
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. I don't believe in all those burpees and all that. If I'm going to make them do something, I'll just make them run sprints.
Mhm.
I just don't. Again, a lot of people believe in that old school mentality where you sit here and just drive the kids into the dirt by making them bear crawl and do all that. I just have never done that, and because I don't think that's a good way to get through the kids. I think, as I've learned over time, if you talk to the kids in a respectful manner and you let them know you really care, I think you get the most out of kids.
Yeah.
I don't really respect coaches that yell and demean kids and put them down, because, one, you're an adult talking to a young person, all they're going to do is just shrink even smaller when all you're doing is, giving them negative feedback. Even if it's not true with giving them the positive feedback, I just think giving kids positive feedback, even if it's somewhat on the borderline of coddling, I just think that's just better for young people these days than to just sit here and just drive home and
Yeah.
tell them, "Oh, good, you shouldn't be playing. Why are you out here? You're wasting our time." And especially calling kids out in front of all their teammates. I
Yeah.
just think that's a good thing to do. I think, in my opinion, and what I do, I try to call kids over to the side and I try to kneel down and get down to their level so I can see them face to face, and I speak to them in a calm, respectable voice to try to get the best out of them. But Mark, with my own two boys, I know what I can and cannot say to them because I've been training them for their whole life. So I know when I need to be very tough on them. I know when I need to pull back.
I just want to point out something you said, George, that I think is really important, and that's calling out your kids publicly.
Yes, no, I don't believe in that.
Because then you're just humiliating them. Like that does no good. And I definitely agree. And I did the same thing, yelling from the sidelines while my kids playing soccer, kick the ball, that sort of thing. And I realized, like, what the heck am I doing? I'm still over here yelling aimlessly. I'm not performing. So just like you, after the play was over, walk over to the side, kneel down with her and say, hey, you got to be more aggressive. Get ready. As soon as the ball is there, then you kick it. Don't wait for the ball to be there and then get ready to kick it. You got to be ready. Really, really, really important. Really important.
Yeah. I think, Mark, if, in the future, when your daughter does something, even if it's not well, if you pull her to the side, tell her, baby, I believe in you. You got this. Just keep going hard. I promise you, you're going to play well. I believe in you. I need for you to believe in yourself too. Let's go out there for the most part. Let's make sure, first and foremost, let's have fun, but don't be afraid and give it your all. I guarantee you she'll play much better because just as well as I know, all young people want from like adults and their parents, they just want their parents to love them and they want to have the approval of their parent. That's all they want in life. They want to be able to make their dad, mom proud, and that their parents say, "You're doing a great job." That's all they want to hear. And I think if we go that route, I think most kids will be more successful than if we're just beating them down all the time, telling them that everything they're doing is wrong. I just don't think that's the way to go, in my opinion.
Well, it's like you said, you know, we look through the lens of as an adult because we're adults, right? And as a professional NFL athlete, I'm sure you have much
Yeah.
greater knowledge of the game than your 10-year-old, you know. And but it's hard to look outside that lens. But before we close out here, I have one more question here for you, George.
Yes.
Something that struck me the other day, I was watching this episode of Game of Thrones. And anyway, there was a scene where this peasant man, he loses his only daughter. She gets killed, right?
Yeah.
And I just found myself like overwhelmed with the emotion. I was like crying. I couldn't stop crying. I'm like, what the heck is happening to me? It's just a TV show. Yeah. I never got emotional before I had kids. Never. Like it was, I like held it like, oh, I've never cried. I would joke. I'm just wondering, like, was that something that you've ever experienced, like extra emotions just from being a dad? Like, is that something that hit you or?
Mark, that is an outstanding question. Mark, I'm one of the toughest guys you will ever know when it comes to playing sports. I played football with a broken jaw.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so when it comes, like, again, just like you said, I never cried, showed any emotion in front of my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, Katie. When we had kids, I found myself, I can remember my oldest son, I'm just sitting there changing his diaper and he's looking at me and I just start crying.
Right?
Yeah, start crying. Just like looking at him. And even like now that he's in a freshman in high school, I walk around the house, I see pictures of him, you know, through all his life. And I'm like about to cry now. Like, you know, because they grow up so fast before your eyes. And you know, you like, for me, I hate it. I hate that my son is getting older, but I know it's part of life because he's pulling away and going to have his own independence. But yeah, it is, for me, it is tough, you know, seeing the kids get older and everything. And I'm a big softy when it comes to my kids, because I cry all the time in front of them. And I try to teach our boys that it's okay to show your emotions, whether you're happy, sad, frustrated, you know, because as males, as men, we are taught, don't cry, toughen up, do this. I tell my boys, no, you show your emotions, your feelings. If something's bothering you, like with me, if I say something to hurt your feelings, please tell dad, you hurt my feelings. And I will make the necessary adjustments to try not to hurt your feelings, because I just think being able to show your emotion is just part of growth.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to try to be a tough person all the time. But again, just like you said, that's part of your growth, that you're being able to show your emotions now that you have your daughters and everything. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, it's certainly it's a humbling experience. And I think, you know, especially when you have kids, or, you know, because life happens when it's funny, the older you get, the higher the stakes are, I think, in life, generally speaking. So if you're not feeling any emotions as a father, like, you know, there's I don't want to say there's something wrong, but it just, I don't know. I'll give you permission, dads. I give you permission to be a little emotional, right? We'll give you permission.
I would say, I think it's something wrong
Yeah.
if you having emotions about your kids. And like, for me, the worst thing in life for me is if my kids had a negative view of me.
Mm. Mm.
That will kill me. And I think if any father doesn't have a problem with how their kid view them, something's wrong. I really think it is. I mean, I really do. But again, being a father, Mark, man, I just love it, man. I wish I could have been a father, you know, my whole life, because it's just the greatest feeling. And maybe it's because when you grow up without a father, you know, you long for, you know, approval from people, and you long for somebody telling you all the time they love you. I believe, because I didn't get that growing up. I got the opposite. I always got, George, you're never going to be good. You're never going to be anybody. I didn't have no male influence in my life until I got to be 13, 14 years old, and that was from Monty Broom. Monty Broom is the first man that I've ever loved in my entire life, a male figure. So for me, Man, I just, it's just hard for me to put in words just how I truly feel about being a father.
Well, I appreciate you paying it forward, because if there's one thing we need right now, it's strong men, strong fathers to guide our kids. It's a
Yeah.
tough time. It's a troubling time. We didn't even get, there's so many different topics we could go into,
Oh, no doubt.
but I just want to encourage everyone, definitely make sure you connect with George D. Jones on LinkedIn. The Present Dad is the book. You definitely want to check it out. George doing great things here and just changing the world one kid at a time. Thank you, George.
Mark, I appreciate having me on.